differentiated themselves against their competitors, also introduced various efficiencies and built in those efficiencies to later take advantage of. Okay? So McKinsey and Company did a study of 1,000 industrial organizations during the period of 1998 to 2002 to find out what was it post and pre-recession. What they found out was that 40% of these companies, which were the leaders pre-recession, post-recession, when the growth phase came, they were no longer the leaders. Okay? 60% of them continued to be the leaders, and this 60% delivered a much higher value to the shareholders compared to this 40% of the companies. What they also found out was that this 60% of the companies were the companies which used this particular recession to their advantage. This adversity that they were seeing then, they improved their processes, they adopted tools, they found out how they can drive better efficiencies, what are the disruptive technologies that can give them competitive advantages, etc. And those companies went on to become leaders. So, Professor Satgopalan talked about few technologies. I think most of the technologies again captured in this. You have got Web 2.0. These are some of the technologies through which, while cutting cost, can be adopted to lead to greater level of efficiencies and to ensure you get a competitive advantage, increase your agility, etc. So those are some of the technologies that you see out here. Whether you look at it from an application perspective, it's SaaS, cloud computing, rapid upgrades, etc. Or on the IT operations side, you look at virtualization, moving from proprietary to standardized process tools and infrastructure refresh, automation, etc.
Well, can I just stop you, please?
Yeah.
Cutting cost, you talked about cutting cost. Cutting cost, why are we always connecting it to recession? I mean, if you ask any CIO around, cutting cost is business as usual.
May I mention especially Indian CIOs as well, because Indians by nature, I have seen, not only being a CIO, but by nature we have been able to cut costs much better than most of the CIOs. But you are right, absolutely right. Cutting cost is something which has been going on for a long time, and so has this technologies been. So if you really look at it, automation, virtualization, these are not new technologies. We have been talking about it for a pretty long time. The difference, I think, this time is that when you are cutting cost, there are a lot of other technologies as well, but when you are cutting cost, you tend to look at these particular specific technologies more closely, which are associated with driving efficiencies within your organization. So while you are cutting cost, these technologies take priority over something else which would not drive cost cuttings to that extent. So the point is that yes, these technologies were there and there were other technologies. During this time, this technology gains more importance from a CIO's perspective. That's perhaps what I'm trying to tell. Yep. So I would recommend 3 essential strategies. One is be smart in controlling cost. Okay? Get a complete visibility of the cost. Look at what is the business alignment of a particular project. Prioritize those projects on the business outcome that you can get. Basically take control of the demand side. Put the IT cost back within your grasp. How to do that? To create a dashboard of all the project that comes in, all the requirement that flows in from the business side, prioritize that, drive the outcome towards that in terms of cutting the cost, and look at the entire cost of that particular project. Second thing is be smart in managing change. Now, change, whether I'm talking, do you know what is the outcome of a particular change that is having in your infrastructure to the business application or to the business outcome that you're trying to drive? Does every staff in your company, whenever is making a change, is aware of what is the business impact of that particular change, so on and so forth. So when you consolidate your service delivery to a centralized service delivery model, you are able to predict and make those changes, knowing the decision and the business outcome of those changes that are being driven in your organization. Lastly, be smart in driving out risk out of your organization through things like best practices, through things like standardization of infrastructure, processes, software, tools, etc. And look at how you can drive automation to reduce the cost of capital as well as your human resource cost. Gartner study puts somewhere between 70 to 75% of the cost of every CIO goes towards maintenance and sustenance of the IT that he has already deployed, with little room left for innovation. Now, the disruptive technology that we have been discussing won't be possible if you have no headroom out there, our flexibility to redeploy resources or financials to those kind of projects. In order to do that, you must first free up those resources, which is where automation comes in. And it gives more predictable business outcomes and compared to when you are not doing this automation. So with this, we went to CIOs and asked them how they are placed, how they are doing this. And one of the feedbacks that came along, this is what CIOs have been telling us, that it is difficult, first of all, to know what is the requirements from a business side and to establish the changes that is happening in the requirement and document it and create a dashboard around it and prioritize it. So that's the first problem. The second problem is it's difficult to determine what is the current state. For example, how many projects, how many people, how many are the demand on the services, what are the shared services, what are the shared infrastructure, which is the duplicate resource, which is the ideal resource, how much of ideal service do you have in your infrastructure, how much of ideal resources are there in your tools, or how much of redundancy that you have built in over a period of time. Can you give me a quick answer on all these questions? Probably not, because it's difficult to answer all these kind of questions on an immediate basis for any one of you. So that's the current state impact. Then it's difficult to access the impact of whether I should reduce a project, should I delay a project, should I kill a project, should I prioritize a project? What if I change the infrastructure? Or what if I retire the infrastructure and get a new infrastructure? What will be the business outcome? What will be the business impact, etc., etc. And difficult to create efficiencies. How do I eliminate duplicated tools? How do I implement repeatable automated processes, etc. Now, so there was, and yesterday we heard about the fact that we need to have a plan in place in order to get to a state where we can take those decisions in order to provide your businesses with disruptive technologies to get a competitive advantage. Now, the basis of that plan is what we have recommended is business technology optimization. How you can do that is you can look at your business from three pillars. One is on the strategy side. Okay, and I will elaborate a little bit more on that. The second is on the applications and the tools and the software and the stuff that you put in place. And the third one is around managing that operation. Now, when you look at this particular slide, let me just quickly go through what I'm trying to say here. Is the basis of a creditable plan can be developed once you get the alignment of these three pillars with businesses. The alignment drives accountability and better control point for the processes and the projects that you are wanting to do with businesses. As I said, prioritizing the project, delivering on that particular project on timelines, monitoring and tracking that particular project to see financial impact of that particular project, and so on and so forth. Second is drive automation in each one of these domains. And the third is drive automation across these three domains so that you can automate everything which is repeatable. Why is that better? Because A, you get consistency.